Hey there, guys. All right, today we're watching something new. I have been meaning to watch this channel since I saw it recommended to me probably 2 years ago now. Um, but so today we are going to start off with this episode of making medieval mead like a Viking. I felt that like kind of fit my, background in terms of history. I wrote my thesis on the Anglo-Saxons during the mid late ninth century when the Viking conquests were happening, specifically on how Alfred the Great was able to be why specifically why Wessex was able to be the last surviving Anglo-Saxon kingdom against the invasions, and also how they just survived, and then sort of also talked about the Anglicization. Been a while since I wrote that, so this my pitch on it is a bit rusty on that thesis there. Also probably not as well written as I could write it now. I've grown a lot as a writer since then. I was how many years ago now? Three. Oh shit, it's been no. Yes, 3 years now. Oh my god. Wow. Anyways, my knowledge on this time period, will it at all be informative about how to make medieval mead? No. I've never made mead. I'm also not much of a drinker anymore, so we'll see. We'll see. Maybe I've disappointed my Viking roots, my Scandinavian roots, more accurate to say. But I'm curious about the process here. I've seen mead making videos before, always been tempted, but I've never done it. If you guys like this foray this into this channel here, into me watching this channel, um I'll continue reacting to it, and also maybe on other videos that he makes. I will try, if I have the ingredients and the ability to make the things that he makes in a video, I will then attempt to make it myself as well and do a little taste testing at the end of the reactions. Um, so yeah, but that's just dependent on, of course, what he makes. I do not know how many of the things I'll be able to make because, one, not very skilled at cooking or baking, but and I don't know how to have the ingredients either. But yeah, all that out of the way, let's dive in and make some medieval mead like a Viking.
You ever wonder where the term honeymoon comes from? I'm about to tell you. See, in the Middle Ages, when a young couple got married, their family would give them a moon or a month's worth of honey mead. And then the young couple would go off, frolic, and make merry for a few weeks, and hopefully come back with a bun in the oven. So that's what we're making today. Not a baby. Mead. So whether
Darn.
you're a Saxon
I mean,
warrior positioned in your shield wall or a marauding Norse Viking, get ready for that sweet, sweet taste of alcoholic honey, mead. This time on Tasting History.
okay, I was not expecting a really dope ass historical fact. I did not know the honeymoon fact. Um, and then I like how he added Norse Viking. Now, of course, in the historical, this is just a random thing. I like this fact. When I was doing my research for my thesis, um, the there were two types of Viking parties. There were the Norse and the Danes. The Danes were not considered a part of the Norse. Now, of course, today we kind of lump all of Scandinavia together. But when I was doing my research, I think I even pointed this out in my thesis paper. The our they were specifically noted as Danes and Norse. They were separate people, which of course, right? Like we're like, yeah, the Danes are different than Swedes and the Norwegians, right? But it was just something that like today we kind of just default lump them all together. Like I think today we would lump and call Danes just Norse as well, even though technically they are not. They are not part of the Norse culture group, I believe. Um, but yeah, they were separate in this time period, or at least referred to as separate things. Probably not a surprise for most people, but I don't know. It was just like a neat little, framing, that I liked.
So a bunch of people have been asking.
And then, of course, depending on which time period we are talking about, it actually wouldn't be correct to term them as Anglo-Saxons. Um, the idea of Anglo-Saxon really wasn't a thing until Alfred the Great, when he became king of the Angles and the Saxons. Oh, when was that? It was after he took over Western Mercia. And although he didn't technically take over Western Mercia, he really kind of did. And he did some finagling there, where no longer there was a king of Mercia, but instead it was just an elderman of Mercia, who then also looked to Wessex for as the superior. Really rusty on this information. Been a couple years, so I do apologize if I do misspeak on some of these things. But yeah, the idea of an Anglo-Saxon identity was not really a thing until a few years into Alfred the Great's rule. It was definitely a thing, probably somewhat on the minds of some people, but I don't think I wouldn't like the Saxons would be Wessex, Sussex, that sort of area, Essex, kind of the coastline of southern Britain. And then the Angles would be, Mercia and I think Northumbria. Kent, maybe? I don't know. Kent might have also been Saxon, because I know Kingdom of Wessex ended up taking over Kent at one point in time. And then the Vikings came in and took that from them at another point. But yes, just filling in some little tidbits here and there of stuff that I remember.
Asking me to make merch or merchandise. So there is some that I just got up in the bar beneath this video, but you know what? I would love some ideas about what kind of stuff you guys want, what I should have made, because I'm not very good at that kind of stuff. Anyway, merch below, more to come. So today's recipe comes from the 13th century Tractus manuscript, Folio 20R.
Ooh, going all the way to the okay. 13th century, a little bit after the age of the Vikings, but honestly, the ingredients probably did not change. I doubt anything would have
Catchy
really
title.
changed.
Now usually I read the full recipe, but this recipe is rather long and rather wordy, so I'm just going to give you the hits, but I am going to put the full translation in the description if you care to read the entire thing. For to make mead, take 1 gallon of fine honey, and to that 4 gallons of water, and heat that water till it be as lang. Then dissolve the honey in the water. Then set them over the fire and let them boil, and ever scum it as long as any filth riseth thereon. And then take it down off the fire and let it cool in another vessel till it be as cold as milk when it cometh from the cow.
Oh man, hold on. This is what I love about old manuscripts. And it really just gives you the idea of the people at the time and what they considered normal, right? The everyday person is not going to know what the fuck it means for the for it to be as cold as milk when it cometh from the cow. Only farmers, who make up like 2% of the population, will understand that reference. And even then, I don't think most farmers these days even have cows. Most farmers these days, I think, are grains and not don't even have any cows. Some might, maybe some like uh, family farms, but like what essentially has become the common farm, I think, of our modern day. No, no, this is no longer something that we can really relate to. Um, and then, of course, also this terminology of till it be as length is something that is no longer in our vernacular. So at least Not that I'm aware of. Maybe it's a term in mead making and alcohol making that I'm not aware of. Which is possible, but I feel like this is an outdated term. So this is the shit that I love seeing in manuscripts and stuff from the past. Just seeing these things that let us, like, even though this is a a, a recipe on how to fucking make mead, it still tells us so much about what was kind of like probably considered common knowledge for the time period, common vernacular. Uh, ah, Love that stuff.
Then take dregs of the finest ale, or else barm, and cast it into the water and the honey, and stir all well together, and so let it stand 3 days and nights. Then draw it from the dregs as clear as thou may into another vessel clean, and let it stand 1 night or 2, and then draw it into another vessel, and serve it forth.
Ooh, only 5 days and nights, and then it was drinkable? I believe today we now make people don't drink mead until it's like months down the line. Um, until it's fermented for like months or whatever. I'm curious if he will do like a modern way of making the mead and compare it to this recipe.
So anyone who makes mead on the regular today is probably thinking, oh, that just doesn't really sound right to me. Because mead usually ferments for weeks, not
Oh my god. I know something. I was right.
days, and then ages for months, not a couple nights. So this is a quick mead, and probably
Not just quick. That's like flash mead. Flash. Unless was there something different about kind of I'm trying to think of what could be really I don't know, I feel like mead making isn't that complex or really so like I feel like what exactly could have been different for them that was it just I mean it's probably just gonna taste well, it would have been just a way of being able to drink a liquid safely. So I'm thinking it's probably going to taste just like honey water, I think. Because it shouldn't be that alcoholic if it's only 5 days, which of course the purpose of the medieval mead might not, I don't really wouldn't have been necessarily to get drunk. It would have just been something to like drink because water wasn't necessarily a safe thing to drink all the time, right? So I'm curious how, because I'm sure he's probably gonna taste test it. So yeah, I'm curious what it's gonna really taste alcoholic in any way or to what degree.
they would have let it age longer if need be. I don't know. This mead is probably going to be not as alcoholic.
Dude, I know my stuff. I know my stuff. Oh, shit, I feel smart.
Very sweet and cloudy, but we shall see. Now, the recipe also gives us.
Okay, so because he just confirmed what I was thinking, I do believe that this was definitely just essentially as a way to safely consume water. Um, and like in a way that also is like kind of more palatable, right? Honey, a nice little sweetener to it. Um, so yeah. And in my understanding, I think it would have been then like if you want to get drunk, it would be specific. I know mead is honey wine, but you know what I mean when I say wine, like red wine, that kind of stuff. Um, which would have been really only. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. It's springtime. Oh God. I feel like, which was really only accessible to the wealthy and the nobility. But like, if you wanted to get drunk, really get drunk, you would, drink wine, or chug a lot of fucking mead,
Instructions on.
or perhaps even ferment it longer. I'm willing to bet that the people of this time period, of the medieval time period, knew about the fermentation process and how long it would take for it to be like a proper alcoholic mead. So yeah.
How to make this mead Eaglin by adding various herbs such as hyssop, betony, moonwort, hart's tongue, and white horehound, just to name a few. Kind of sounds like the three Weird sisters at the beginning of Macbeth. Woo! Now, Eaglin is a shortened version of
I love that reference to Macbeth there.
the
I
word
like it. I love
Meadiglin,
it.
meaning healing mead, because in medieval recipes, usually when there were herbs added, it was medicinal, because that was the medicine that was most commonly available. And even today, any mead that is made with herbs and spices is called a metheglin, very similar to Meadiglin. There are actually dozens of terms for all different kinds of mead depending on what you're adding into it and how alcoholic or how much honey is in it. There are tons. And I'm not going to go into them all right now, but there are some great resources, books, in the video description if you really want to kind of get into mead and how to make all the different various forms. But for today, we're sticking with the traditional 3 ingredients: water. Don't use distilled water for this. Mineral or spring water, that's the way to go. Honey, and ale dregs or dried ale.
Well, you'd should be going to your local well and drawing the water forth, or to your local spring and boiling it so that it is clean.
Yeast. So the recipe calls for 4 gallons of water and 1 gallon of honey, but that's a lot. So I am going to be making 1 gallon of water and a quart of honey. And really, as long as you stay with the 4-to-1 ratio, you're going to be good to go.
Yep.
Now, as for the yeast, if you can get ale barm or dregs, fantastic. But if not, you can go ahead and use dry yeast. The thing is, in either case, they didn't tell you how much to use, and it's really going to depend on how active the yeast is. So you're kind of just guessing. What I ended up doing was about 2 tablespoons of barm, and then I put it into a little bit of water with a drop of honey just to make sure that it was active, and it was. If you're using dried yeast, it's hard to say. Usually for a gallon you would use like a pinch, but because we're only doing this for 3 days, fermenting it for 3 days, I'd use a little bit more, maybe like 1/3 of a packet, maybe. So first, if you're worried about bacteria, you can go ahead and sterilize all of the tools that we're going to be using, though in the 13th century they wouldn't have really cared, though they actually
Well, it would have been as clean as they probably could get it.
kind of have a way around that, so we'll get to that. But it can't hurt to sterilize your equipment. So what you'll need is a large pot for boiling, a large container for fermenting, another container for aging for all of 2 nights, and preferably like a bottle with a small opening so you can fit a bubbler or airlock. That lets the carbonation out without other things getting in. And then you can also
But what would they have done for that in the medieval times? Like, whoa, it's not like they don't really. It could be one of those things that was left out because they assumed it was super common knowledge that every household would have the ability to just the components needed. So I'm curious. I wonder how they did, or if they just fucking left it in the bottles.
probably use a siphon or a funnel depending on how you plan on getting the mead from one container to the next. Siphon or funnel will definitely make things easier. So following the recipe, we heat our water until it is lang. Now, I could not find anywhere a translation, Middle English, Old English, anything for the word lang. So if anyone knows, great. Otherwise,
I don't.
it really probably just means rather hot, because what you want to be doing is to dissolve the honey in there so it's not just falling to the bottom. So add the honey and give it a mix until it's dissolved. Then boil the honey and water mixture called must. Now, a lot of modern mead makers would not boil it at this point, but I think that that's part of the way that they got rid of the bacteria that might have been in the water in the Middle Ages. If you boil it, it'll get rid of most of the bacteria. Also, this thing is going to have alcohol and a ton of honey in it, so there's not going to be a lot left alive no matter what, so you're probably pretty safe. As it boils, skim off any scum that forms at the top. Though you really shouldn't have that much scum unless you're using honey directly from honeycomb. because that can have dirt or pieces of wax in it, and that's really what's going to be bubbling up to the top. Once boiled, take it off.
Dude, I love it when people are so knowledgeable on things that I have no fucking clue about, like making, food and stuff.
The fire and pour it into.
I just follow recipes online that I see that look yummy, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm gonna try and make that." And I eat it, and I'm like, "Ah, that was pretty good. I'm gonna say that," but I don't really retain any knowledge as to why it tasted good,
To the second vessel, hopefully doing a better job than I did because I spilled a bunch and it got really, really sticky for like days afterward. I couldn't get it to be non-sticky. Then you gotta let that honey and water mixture cool until it is the temperature of milk when it comes out of a cow, about 98 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. If you put yeast in there before it gets about to that, it could kill the yeast, so just wait. It can take a while, but just wait. Then pour in your dregs or barm or yeast, then cover the top, not airtight, and leave it be out of direct sunlight. You could even put it like in a closet. Now by the next day, the mead should be in what I call the Don Ho phase of mead making because you'll see tiny bubbles starting to rise to the top. Oh, sometimes I hate myself for those kinds of jokes. But I don't care.
He and I would be friends. I can already tell.
Makes me laugh. Now, if you were leaving it for longer than 3 days, it would actually start to get clear in this beautiful golden colored mead that we know and love so well. But in 3 days, that ain't gonna happen. So after 3 days, go ahead and transfer it, trying not to get too much of the yeast at the bottom to that next container or bottle. Then stick a bubbler in it and let it sit for a couple more nights. Now, I'm actually making 2 little bottles out of this gallon, one that I'm going to try, in 2 nights, and then one that I'm going to hold on to for maybe 6 months or so.
He's doing what I thought he would. Oh, dude, I feel so fucking smart in this. Oh, I don't know why. Like, it seems like such a duh. Of course he's gonna do that, right? I don't know. I just feel smart for being able to predict that he would do like a taste test like that, a comparison like that.
I want to see how the flavor changes. It's not going to have any more fermentation time from that first fermenting, but the aging hopefully might mellow out the flavor. I don't know. We'll see. So what?
I would have also done another. Okay, I would have done a third then, where it would ferment for longer. To see kind of like how different how we make our mead today tastes different to this recipe.
What inspired me to make mead today was actually because of a video game that's coming out today, or the day that this video will air, called Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Not associated with them in any way, but I'm still super excited because it's like a history-based game of like my favorite time period.
I will say, I've said this before on this channel, and actually when I started this channel out, that was the year, like I think my second video, one of my first few videos on this channel was me reacting to one of the Assassin's Creed trailers for Valhalla. I enjoyed Valhalla, but really, if you are not like me, a Anglo-Saxon and historian, like if you don't care for that time period, I thought their portrayal of Alfred the Great was fantastic. He was my favorite part of the game. You are probably not going to like that game, but if you are like me, I think you'll enjoy it.
Saxons and Vikings, fighting it out. So
I did find the combat very fucking boring, though.
Assuming that there's going to be mead in there somewhere.
So
when you think of, Saxons and Vikings, yes, you think of mead, but mead actually got its start way before that. The earliest evidence for mead making actually comes from pottery found in northern China, dating from about 7000 BC.
China.
There was residue from honey and the compounds associated with fermentation. And there are mentions of alcoholic drinks made with honey throughout Chinese literature, including the Song of Mead by Su Shi in the 11th century. In Central Europe, similar residues have been found in the pottery of the Bell Beaker culture, which roamed Bronze Age Europe more than 4,000 years ago. But the earliest written mention of mead actually comes from the ancient Indian Rig Veda, which says, "I have tasted the sweet drink of life, knowing that it inspires good thoughts and joyous expansiveness to the extreme, that all the gods and all mortals seek it together, calling it mead. High praise indeed for this our mead. Now, the drink that they're talking about in the Rig Veda is actually known as soma, which is a honey drink that probably also had some hallucinogens or something in it because it would give visions of the gods. So hopefully not what I'm making today. And while this is the first mention that we have of mead being associated with the gods, it is far from the last. The Minoan culture produced mead and credited it to their mother goddess Potnia, whose priestesses were named Melissa, meaning bee. The love that the Minoans had for this drink passed on to the other Greek civilizations. They also used these same Melissae as priestesses for Artemis and Demeter, and the drink eventually made its way to the Roman Empire. Columella gives us a recipe in De Re Rustica, as does Pliny the Elder in Naturalis Historia. There is a wine also made solely of honey and water. For this purpose, it is recommended that rainwater should be kept for a period of 5 years. This beverage is known as hydromeli, and with age acquires the flavor of wine. It is nowhere more highly esteemed than in Phrygia. Now, aren't you glad I said to use spring water rather than make you go get rainwater and wait 5 years? You're welcome. Now, after the fall of Rome, our mead journey takes us north to Britannia, or Britain. In one Welsh poem from around 550 AD called Canu I Mead, we hear of that iconic drinking vessel for mead, the mead horn. May Maelgwn of Mona be affected with mead, and affect us from the foaming mead horns with the choicest pure liquor, which the bees collect and do not enjoy. Mead distilled sparkling, its praise is everywhere. So the mead in that poem is sparkling, which is interesting because based on what I've seen with our mead, ours is also going to be sparkling. In another Welsh poem, Y Gododdin, we hear the story of a battle where those fighting were rather hungover from too much mead. Men went to Catraeth at morning, their high spirits lessened their lifespan. They drank mead, golden sweet and snaring. For a year the minstrels were merry. Their high spirits lessened their lifespan. How Welsh. Anyway, I wanted to actually thank a Welshman, the Welsh Viking, here on YouTube, named Jim, for helping me with a bunch of the research and the pronunciation, as well as letting me know that...
I was gonna say, his pronunciation, for an American, sounded pretty fucking good.
The Welsh word for drunk is meddwi, which literally means meaded. I love that. Now, at about the same time that these Welshmen were lessening their lifespan with mead, the Irish were drinking it too, just across the water on the hill of Tara, where the banquet hall was known as Teach Mithorda, the mead circling house, which I can only imagine is rather similar to Hrothgar's mead hall, Hjorut in Beowulf, where Grendel would rip apart drunken Danes. They would willingly wait on their wassailing benches, a grapple with Grendel with grimmest of edges. Then this mead hall at morning with murder was reeking.
I love the Saxon poetry. I just love the sound of alliteration. They would willingly wait on their wassailing benches, to grapple with Grendel with grimmest of edges. Then this mead hall at morning with murder was reeking, the building was bloody at breaking of daylight. I wrote a poem for my most recent book that I am currently querying out to agents, and originally I was going to try this alliteration for the poem, but I was very bad at coming up with the right words that I wanted to convey what I was wanting to convey, so I gave up on the alliteration for that one, and I instead did just syllabic, where it follows a syllable count pattern for it, yeah.
The building was bloody at breaking of daylight, the bench deals all flooded, dripping.
What is the alliteration? There's not much alliteration here in the... Well, 2 B's and 2 D's. 3 D's. The bench deals all flooded, dripping and bloodied. I wonder what the... Maybe no alliteration on the final line there? It doesn't quite have the alliteration of the previous lines.
And bloodied. Now let us pause right there. While I beseech thee, if you have never read Beowulf, or if you only read it under duress in high school or college, go get a copy because it is so great. And it's super quick to read. It's not very long. I'm going to put my favorite translation in the description, but really any translation works. Don't watch the movie, but it's fantastic. And whoever wrote it, we don't know, but whoever wrote it really was the greatest of poets or skalds, and must have gotten that from Odin, because Odin made good skalds. And that brings us to Norse mythology. Following a war...
I read Tolkien's translation of Beowulf, and in terms of the scholarship of Beowulf, Tolkien is actually extremely inspirational. Here's a fun fact for you that I am adding on to here. Really up until Tolkien, the 1920s, 30s, I can't remember exactly when he was doing this. I think it was the 20s was really when he did when it made these arguments for Beowulf. But anyways, really up until Tolkien's lifetime, until he was a scholar of the Anglo-Saxons and whatnot, Beowulf was largely regarded just solely as a historical text. It was not valued in terms of its artistry. It was just used by historians as a means to understand the Anglo-Saxon Saxon culture of the time period. Tolkien comes in and he's like, no, this just isn't for the historians. This is literature, beautiful literature. And so he essentially is the reason why you read Beowulf in English class. It's because of him. Which, weirdly enough, for me, when I was working on my thesis for the Anglo-Saxons, I was surprised when I was reading the secondary sources, the sources written in the modern day, and seeing these historians referencing Beowulf as to understand Anglo-Saxon culture. I was just like, what? That's a poem, a story. And so, like, I think that would have made Tolkien pretty happy to hear someone be surprised a poem was being used for historical study instead of just appreciating it for its literature, its beauty, its beautiful literature meaning and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, of course, like, obviously with hindsight, I'm like, duh, of course you could use a poem from that time period as a source for your historical research. It's a primary source from the time period. It just, I don't know, it just didn't click for me until I saw another historian actively using it in their argument for their text. But yeah.
Or between two factions of the Norse gods, they decided to call a truce in the same way that we do today by spitting into a giant cauldron. Well, out of this godly saliva rose a creature, a man, god, not really specific, named Kvasir, and he was all-knowing. He was the most brilliant poet and had all of the knowledge that there was to be had. Even the gods would ask him questions that they needed to know. Well, when Kvasir wasn't busy, he liked to go down to Midgard, where the humans lived, and pass on some of his knowledge. How kind of him. Well, one day he came across two dwarves named Fjalar and Galar, who said, "Come on in, we'll make you some mead." And that's what they proceeded to do. They made him some mead. They slit him open with knives and drained his blood into 3 vats, then added honey to it to create mead. How dark. But that mead supposedly gave some of his power if you drank it, so it was called the Mead of Poetry. But old Kvasir was, of course, missed by the gods, who were like, "Hey, dwarves, where's our smart guy?" And the dwarves were like, "Oh no, you know what? He came over, and he was so smart that he choked on his own knowledge and died." And they believed him. Well, these two jerk dwarves weren't done with their little killing spree, because a little while later, they killed a couple, a husband and wife, who were giants. And the giant's son was like, no. So he came over and took the dwarves and set them on an island that was about to flood so they would die. But the dwarves were like, hey, if you don't kill us, you can have this mead of poetry that we've got. And the giant was like, okay, and let them go. And now their part of the story is completely done. It's kind of weird. But the giant didn't drink the mead himself. He actually just kind of hoarded it and gave it to somebody else to protect. And when Odin, played by Anthony Hopkins, found out, he decided, I need this mead of poetry, because Odin prided himself on his love of knowledge and poetry. Anyway, after a bunch of scheming and shape-shifting, Odin was allowed to have 3 sips, 1 from each vat of the mead. But joke's on them, because an Odin sip is like the sip that I'm going to take if you offer me a drink of your cocktail. He drained it dry, all 3 vats in 3 little sips, or huge sips, I guess. Then he turned into an eagle, and with the Steve Miller Band playing behind him, flew home to Asgard and regurgitated the mead into his own 3 containers. But he dropped a few drops down to Midgard, where the humans live. And those drops are said to be the beginning of all mediocre poetry in the world. Because to be a great poet or skald, you have to get your mead directly from Odin himself. And I'm pretty sure that whoever wrote Beowulf got their mead directly from Odin himself. Now, the mead that I'm making today, I'm not going to guess is going to make me into a great poet, but maybe if you drink enough of it and you kind of get a little chatty, you'll think you're a great poet, because that has
I was literally about to make the same fucking joke.
definitely happened to me in the past with mead. Anyway, let's give it a shot. So once 2 nights have passed, pour the mead into that final clean vessel, and it's ready to drink.
Oh yeah, it is cloudy.
Oh dear. Oh, no. Okay. Well, that was embarrassing. My ale horn seems to be leaking. That's not good. Nobody likes a leaky ale horn. So instead, I'm using a beer mug. And that's okay. So let's go ahead and try this mead. It smells very yeasty still.
So maybe too much yeast was used?
I guess it's to be expected. I like it. You know what? It's not as... When I poured it, it was effervescent, but when you drink it, you don't really get it. It's pretty flat. There's definitely some alcohol in there, though I don't know how much, because I didn't... you can find out. There are ways you can test it and everything. I didn't do it. Definitely alcoholic, though.
Okay, I was not expecting... Okay, so if you can, just by taking a sip of it, tell that it's alcoholic, then it's probably... It's got a decent amount to it. So, okay.
And definitely super sweet. I think it would mellow if I gave it some more time, which I'm going to do. Obviously not fermenting, but I am going to leave it in that second bottle, maybe 6 months. Maybe in 6 months we do another episode on something else, and I drink the rest of the mead, and we see how it goes. Anyway, go make yourself some mead. It's actually not that hard. Just take some time, and enjoy life, and enjoy poetry. And I will see you next time on Tasting History.
And I was making medieval mead like a Viking. This was fantastic. I feel like this was a great introductory video for me to go to for this channel. This was really fun. I liked how he kind of just explained the process, and then once he explained the process, he was like, all right, now let's fucking talk about history, some historical documentation of the mead and what different cultures maybe like where they believe it originated from or whatever the fuck. So I thought that was really cool. I really liked his way of telling the stories here in this video, and he included not just like, yes, this was making medieval mead like Viking, though of course it was in a 13th century document, so of course well past the Viking age. But you know what? Likely the process was still the same. But then I like how he brought in the other cultures, like making meat, honey, and water. that's something that's gonna be shared around the world. But I still like that he talked about like, hey, yeah, we also have sources here from ancient India, from ancient China. I just thought that was cool, including those sources from other parts of the world. Um, that's all I have to say here. This I yapped way more than I thought I would. I did not think I would yap as much as I did, but you know what? Something just activated inside my brain. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.